Welcome to Base Vision Inside Security episode 19. Today we are talking about critical asset management, which is a quite interesting topic because it helps us a lot in security operations. With me is here today Nicola, which helps me to explain the whole feature set of critical asset management to you. First of all, what is critical asset management?
So Defender XDR actually knows a classification model, which basically helps us to identify the value of an asset. When we talk about assets, this mostly refers in a context of devices, identities, cloud resources we have priced.
So the value helps us then in, for example, better understanding where an incident is happening. Is it on a high value target as well of the attackers, for example? Or are there other areas where it can help?
Yeah, that's a good first statement. So basically, whenever there's an incident, the incident automatically inherits the most critical tag. This means if you have an asset which is tagged as highly critical, the incident will inherit the tag. So that's beneficial for all the security analysts viewing an incident because it's then directly visible that this is about a high value asset. But it's also useful if you talk about vulnerability management and security exposure management capabilities, because if you have there a look on the exposed devices or users, for example, you're also able to see the asset criticality there. So it actually helps us prioritizing the things we're doing as part of the
So, but is it because, earlier times we had CMDBs, we had other systems where we probably had this information in, but how does that work with Defender XDR? Is that complicated?
No, so the good thing is the feature is up and running for all Defender XDR customers because the asset classification uses system-based classification mechanisms, which tries to pre-classify or actually classifies all the assets by default based on Microsoft-defined rules. So that happens automatically, but there are some tweaks we can apply if we want to bring in our own level of classification.
So without your interaction, it's just running, it classifies your assets already. But probably Microsoft or a normal environment looks a little bit different than your environment, or you have specific other crown jewels which you would like to have marked as critical asset. And that's why I think it's important that you understand the options you have in managing them. Yeah, should we have a look into this?
Yeah,
how that works?
Jump into the portal. So basically the whole configuration of the critical asset management is done in the Defender XDR portal. Under the settings, Microsoft Defender XDR, there we find the topic around critical asset management. Here you already get a glimpse of the predefined classifications which are maintained by Microsoft. So for example, if we have here on a look on the Azure Virtual Machine classification, we can see here a description where Microsoft tries to identify virtual machines which are onboarded Defender for endpoint, where we have also a user signed in, which is also marked as critical. Now Microsoft automatically assigns here a default classification high. And if we, for example, say, hey, for our use case, you want this to be a medium, or on the other hand, to be a very high, we can also adjust those kind of built-in classification rules. So if we hit here save, we basically moved here the classification from high to very high. Or what we can also do, we could, for example, turn off the whole rule if we disagree with a particular classification at all. But the preferred way is for sure adjusting here the criticality level.
And I think if we manage them here, is there something else to know? Are the systems just really automatically classified, or could there be a topic?
Yeah, that's a very good thing. So what Microsoft does, they basically do a best effort classification, but sometimes they're not always sure. For example, if you talk about Windows servers and the associated roles, they maybe think, okay, it could be a configuration manager server. So sometimes if you go here to the assets of a particular rule, it could be that we need to approve some kind of assets as part of the classification. So that's for sure a good thing to revisit to see whether we have any kind of pending assets that need to be approved that we agree with classification.
So that's probably an action which you can take out of this video. Go to the portal, look if you have systems which you should approve, if the classification is correct. And then that's already something which was beneficial then.
Yeah.
And can we create own rules? So can we define our own criticalities, for example?
Yeah, so that's something additionally we can do because if you, for example, have users using an on-prem system where Microsoft doesn't know about the criticality or the existence at all because it's, for example, integrated with Active Directory, we can say, hey, we want to create a new classification. And we can, of course, give it a name. So we could call it critical business users. And what we can actually do, we can build here dynamic queries. We can differentiate between devices, identities, and cloud resources. So here we could, for example, say, hey, if the account name starts with a particular prefix, we automatically want to set a classification. Now, the cool thing is you hit on next, get a preview, the assets, and what we can then do is assign our own criticality. And this will then be automatically propagated to all users which start a particular prefix.
I think that's something which is extremely useful. I have seen a lot of customers which were building their VIP user list and so on. And that's exactly something where we can then very easily build an own rule, say, hey, if something is member of this group, tag it as critical. So yeah. I think it's a very beneficial feature which we have. And we can as well tag manually device. Is that correct?
Exactly. So if you're, for example, on an individual device, you can also just in the context menu select the three dots here, the criticality option. And if you just have an individual asset and not a bunch of assets, you can easily do that directly here and say, hey, this is for me criticality very high, and you can apply that to an individual device. And this again will then be inherited when it comes to incidents, but also about additional security exposure management.
So that's quite cool. I think we should definitely tune it, that we have it in exposure management, in vulnerability management, but as well in incident handling. Thank you, Nicola, for being here, for showcasing this functionality to all of you. And I hope you enjoyed this session.